everyone, happy Friday. Hope everybody's got some great plans for the weekend. Well, today I was watching Tim Pool, and he was kind of going into, what's going on in California and kind of his take. But I think in his take, he kind of misses the larger I would say, flaw in the system. But I'll kind of go over it. I kind of look at things now in a different light. As a matter of fact, I was talking about how New York City ultimately is trying to put an end to outside dining by creating a process in government to have people have to have structures that need to be that can only be out for a certain period of time, and they create a process for permitting, and then they create a process for not only permitting for food, but also permitting for alcohol service, which is like huge in New York City. At any rate, they create a process. If the government doesn't like something, and it's something that the general public likes, they create a process which ultimately ends up killing whatever the government didn't like. And so in this case, I'm looking at California, and specifically the way that California is able to, I won't say intentionally manipulate their elections, but have essentially removed the barriers so that things theoretically could happen within the legal framework in which California has put out there. And so if we look at a couple things, if we wanted to determine like how, a system could be created to ultimately just kind of screw elections. One is you would make a system where there's no ID to register to vote. In California, there's no ID to register to vote. Within that as well, you would create a system that allows for the legal harvesting of ballots, and not just by family members, but by anyone. So anyone can go around and collect ballots. You would also say no ID to vote. So anybody can come in and say they are who they are and just vote. You'd also mass mail ballots to every single individual in the state, and just to give them the opportunity to vote by mail if they want to, but they can also go in person and vote. It's referred to as universal vote by mail, which is what California calls it. You create a system where not only would you send out ballots to every single person in the state, or every single registered voter in the state, you would also allow votes to be able to be collected and processed as long as they're postmarked the date of the election. So they can come in 22 days later, as long as they're postmarked with the date of the election, they're still a valid vote. And California, this is why they have like 30 some odd days to actually certify the election. And then even within the process for taking in, mail-in votes, you have signature verification. And so, you can staff it up, or you could understaff it and create a lot of pressures on those those limited staff that you have to process all of those mail-in ballots that came in a certain period of time, which will then lead them to maybe be a little lax on signature verification. But what I find interesting, right, is I'm not just looking at this from the perspective of a general skeptic of government or whatever it may be. I'm looking at it from the perspective of people have been charged and found guilty in the state of California for manipulating these systems. Recently, for those that were paying attention, James O'Keefe had an undercover video in California that ended up leading to the prosecution, and ultimately the guilty verdict in a case that involved, I wrote this down, May 2026 of this year. Brenda Lee Brown Armstrong, a 64-year-old Marina Del Rey woman, and long-time collector of for ballot initiatives, was federally charged on one felony count of paying another person to register to vote. Now, she allegedly paid homeless individuals on LA's Skid Row. You can see this on video, in cigarettes, in gift cards, sometimes in cash. We're talking about $1, $2, $3. These are drug addicts on Skid Row, to fill out voter registration forms so that they could sign petitions she was circulating, in which she was paid to collect. So if you're going to sign a petition, you got to be a legal registered voter in the state of California. So the only way to get petitioners, in this case, she went out to homeless people, drug addicts on Skid Row, got them to register to vote, and then ultimately got them to sign the petition so that whatever initiative that she was pushing could get passed. Now, she's been doing this for a very long time, and she only got caught because James O'Keefe had an undercover camera. Now, had he not had the camera there, would she have been caught? Probably not. Then there was, in Sonoma County in 2024, there was another person. Now I'm going to butcher this last name, but it's William Eschenbach. Eschenbach, yeah. A 77-year-old man was convicted and sentenced for voter fraud for intentionally voting twice. He voted with his mail-in ballot, and then he also voted in person, not only in the primary election, but also in the general election. He said he was just doing it to test the system. How many other people out there are doing it just to test the system? It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But the big one was in 2020, Carlos Antonio de Bourbon Montenegro, super long name, 53, submitted more than 8,000 fraudulent voter registration applications between July of 2020 and October 2020, as well as allegedly falsifying names, addresses, and signatures on nomination papers. He was running for office on nomination papers under penalty of perjury to run for mayor of Hawthorne. The defendant was trying to get a registrar's office to send them mail-in ballots to fake voters. And so if you were going to cheat, you don't need to cheat. There's no actual cheating. There's just manipulating the system. In some cases, people got caught for cheating only because they got greedy and it became very obvious, or they just happened to be in an undercover video by James O'Keefe, or let's just say anybody out there that has a camera and happens to catch an individual doing something like this. But otherwise, hey, everybody, no widespread voter fraud exists. It's a fantasy. Just anytime I hear that, I just immediately dismiss somebody, because you can go online and find tons and tons of people that are found guilty, that got caught, which is the key thing, for either trying to rig elections, usually using mail-in ballots, or absentee ballots, and getting caught. There was one in Connecticut as well. The race had to be redone. And so, I mean, this stuff is out there. I think it's so disingenuous for people to say that, like, oh, voter fraud doesn't happen, it doesn't really exist, and no widespread. They're always quick to say widespread. Well, nobody's arguing widespread. It only takes like one individual trying to register 8,000 people to win his election, right? To have all of those ballots, which in California get sent out in the mail. And so just have one address listed for all of these individuals, maybe a handful of addresses, and you just go by and you just collect all these ballots, and then you fill these ballots in, and then you send them in. Or you don't even have to send them in. You can actually walk them in or have somebody else walk them in, because ballot harvesting in California is legal. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And again, as predicted, all the left-wing media right now is saying that Trump is trying to rig the election. And the irony in that statement, based on the lax voting regulations and laws that are in California, and how they may or may not be being manipulated in the favor of Democrat candidates. The hypocrisy, it's so ridiculous. It's absolutely so ridiculous. But at any rate, hey, maybe I'm just a random guy on the internet who has a totally wrong opinion and is looking at the facts and coming up with the wrong conclusions. Hey, you tell me. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and keep believing that hopefully the best is still ahead for America. Peace out.